We spend so much of our lives thinking about how to get rich. But what if that's not even the right question? Today, we're going way beyond just piling up money. We're talking about how to architect a financial system that's designed to outlive you, to outlive me, to outlive everyone we know. We're going to talk about building a legacy engine.
So let's just cut right to it with a pretty intense question. If you were gone tonight, what actually happens to everything you've built? Does it keep growing, keep working, becoming a force for generations? Or does it all just get liquidated, taxed, and basically forgotten in like 2 years? How you answer that question, well, that's everything.
Because really, there are only two outcomes. On one side, you have an empire, a system that's built from the ground up to perpetuate itself, to grow on its own forever. And on the other side, a temporary surplus. It's just a pile of assets that, let's be honest, without you at the wheel, gets eaten alive by taxes and entropy. Getting this difference is absolutely the key.
Okay, so why do so many incredibly smart, successful people end up with just a temporary pile of cash? The framework we're digging into today says it's because of a fundamental glitch in our thinking, a kind of bug in our own neural operating system that almost always leads to a catastrophic failure.
And here it is. It's called the mortality bug. It's that deep biological instinct that basically hardwires us to only plan inside our own 80-year window. We think about our own retirement, maybe setting our kids up, but we almost never think in terms of centuries. And that short-term view, it's a total breakdown of real systems thinking. Think about it like this. All your ambition, your hard work, your incredible drive, it's like you're building this world-class, high-performance racing engine. But you've only put enough fuel in the tank for one single lap. The second you're not in the driver's seat, that engine just sputters out and dies. It's a masterpiece of engineering with no plan to keep running. And what's constantly working against that engine? A force called systemic erosion. It's just a law of the universe, really, entropy, but for your wealth. See, any system that doesn't have a self-repairing logic built into its code will inevitably decay and fall apart. It gets eaten by taxes, bad decisions, or maybe the next generation just doesn't have the same drive. Which really brings us to this incredibly powerful quote that sums up the whole problem. You might have the vision of a master architect. You're designing this magnificent cathedral of a legacy. But if you're stuck with the mortality bug, you're essentially building that entire cathedral out of cardboard. The first real storm comes along and poof, it's gone. So that's the problem in a nutshell. It's a big one. But how do we solve it? Well, that brings us to part 2, architecting perpetuity. This is all about making a fundamental mindset shift, moving away from just accumulating stuff and toward becoming the architect of a system that's built to last forever. And the core of that shift is moving from ownership to systemic stewardship. See, ownership is tied directly to you. It dies when you die. But stewardship, that decouples the wealth from any single person. You're no longer the owner. You become the architect, the first steward, of a system designed to outlive everybody. And believe it or not, we can actually quantify this. Think of it like a giant tug of war. Up top in the numerator, you've got your growth forces, the yield your assets generate, multiplied by the strength of your governance logic, your rules. And down below, in the denominator, you've got the forces of decay, tax leakage, and what's called generational decay. This is basically the math for permanence. And here's the magic number, the tipping point. When that L value, your legacy score, gets bigger than 1, it means your system is officially winning the tug of war. It's creating more value than it's losing to all that erosion. And that, right there, is the moment you go from just being rich to creating something, well, eternal. So how do you pull this off in the real world? You use something called a logic cage. It sounds intense, but it's just the practical structure that enforces your rules. It could be a trust, a foundation, or even something super modern like a DAO. The point is, it's a system that holds the assets and runs them based on your code, totally independent of you or any other single person. Okay, so we've got the theory. What are the actual practical steps you need to take? Well, the source material lays out a blueprint for this. It's called the Legacy Protocol. This is how you actually go in, dismantle that mortality bug, and install this new engine for perpetuity. And the protocol is refreshingly simple. It's just 3 core steps. Step 1, you execute what's called a post-human audit. Step 2, you apply governance over inheritance. And finally, step 3, you perform jurisdictional shielding. Let's quickly break those down. That post-human audit, it's a stress test. You ask the hard question. If I vanish today, does the system survive and thrive on its own? Governance over inheritance is a total game changer. You stop leaving money to people. Instead, you leave money to protocols where people can gain access as a reward for upholding the system's values, not just because they were born. And jurisdictional shielding is just smart global strategy, placing your assets in legal structures and places where they're protected from being easily dismantled. And all this leads us to the final, really powerful idea here. This is about finally building your infinite empire. It's about recognizing the incredible scale of what's possible once you stop building sandcastles. And the source material leaves us with this incredible challenge aimed right at you. You possess a high bandwidth mind. It's time to stop building sandcastles. I mean, think about that. If you have the mental firepower to build amazing things, why would you spend all that energy on something temporary that the next tide is just going to wash away? Because in the end, this isn't about you living forever. The goal is to build a system that does. A system that keeps working, keeps growing, and keeps executing your vision long after you're gone. So the final question isn't about what you'll build in your lifetime. The real question is, what will your system build? Welcome to The Explainer. Look, today we're going way beyond just building wealth. We're talking about architecting perpetuity. How do you build something that is literally designed to last forever? All right, let's get right to it. I want you to ask yourself a very serious, very direct question. If you were removed from your system tonight, what really happens to everything you've worked for? Because, the answer to that question, it tells you everything you need to know about what you're actually building. Yeah, because if your answer is, well, it gets liquidated, taxed, and basically forgotten, then let's be honest, you don't have an empire. What you have is a temporary surplus. And believe me, that surplus is on a countdown timer, and that timer is heading straight to zero. So what's the real problem here? What's the diagnosis? Look, this isn't about the market crashing or just some bad luck. The problem is way deeper. It's a bug in our own mental operating system. It's a total catastrophic failure in how we think about systems. And the biggest, most limiting bug of them all? It's something we call the mortality bug. It's like our factory default setting as humans, right? It traps our vision inside this tiny 80-year window of a single lifetime. But for a high performer, for someone like you, this isn't just a small bias. No, it's a critical system error. It's like you've built this incredible high-performance engine, but you've only given it enough fuel to do a single lap. What happens after that? Well, that bug, that mortality bug, it leads directly to the next big problem, systemic erosion. And this is based on a fundamental principle of the universe, really. Any system that doesn't have a self-repairing logic built into it will eventually just fall apart. That's entropy. For your wealth, this erosion has a name. It's the consumption trap. This is where everything you've built gets eaten alive by the next generation's bad habits or just gets completely wiped out by taxes. And for the kind of person who builds incredible things, the atypical thinker, this slow realization, it creates something, we call it existential friction. You know that feeling? It's that nagging voice in the back of your head, that psychological drag you feel when you realize deep down that all your work, it's fundamentally ephemeral, it's temporary, and that feeling, it just quietly kills your drive. So listen to that friction. It's a massive warning sign. It's your subconscious telling you that, yeah, you're a master architect, you're building this absolutely magnificent cathedral, but you're building the whole damn thing out of cardboard. And what happens to a cardboard cathedral in the first storm? It's gone. Poof. Just like that. And this leads us to a really, really hard truth, one that might sting a little. Without a system, a protocol that demands excellence and accountability, you aren't providing for your family. No, you're just subsidizing their future incompetence. Think about that. You're actually removing the very pressures and challenges that made you successful in the first place. So here's the bottom line, the crucial point. Without a real legacy architecture in place, that grand empire you're spending your life building, it's really just a high-end hobby. I mean, it's an impressive project for sure, but it's a project that just ends the moment you do. And this right here, this is the fatal error. It's so simple when you see it. You are running a global, multi-generational vision on a disposable battery. And that battery is you. And the second that battery runs out of juice, the entire system just shuts down. Game over. Okay, so that's the problem. It's a big one. How do we fix it? Well, it's not about a small tweak here or there. It requires a complete paradigm shift. We have to literally upgrade our entire mental operating system, moving from this finite, single lifetime thinking to architecting true perpetuity. And the very first move, you have to shift your mindset from ownership to systemic stewardship. See, the goal is no longer to just accumulate a pile of assets for yourself. The goal is to architect a system, a self-sustaining system, and then your job is simply to guide it, to be its steward. You have to decouple the wealth from any single person, including you. And the objective of this new system, this whole new way of thinking, it can actually be boiled down to a simple, incredibly powerful formula. The goal is this: L must be greater than 1. L stands for legacy persistence. And this isn't just a concept, it's the mathematical threshold for true permanence.
Okay, so what does that even mean, L greater than 1? How does it work? Well, think of it like a scale. It's all about balance. On one side, you have your growth factors. That's your asset yield multiplied by your governance logic, which is just the rules you build into the system. The goal is to make that side heavier than the other side, which is full of all the corrosive forces trying to tear it down, like tax leakage and generational decay. When you finally solve this equation, when you get L to be greater than 1, that's the moment you stop being just rich and you start building something that is eternal.
And the way you do this, the practical tool, is by placing your wealth into what we call a logic cage. Now, don't let the name intimidate you. This is just a system, right? It could be a trust, a foundation, maybe even a DAO. The point is, it's a structure that operates autonomously. It runs on the code, the principles and rules that you embed within it. It doesn't need you anymore. It just runs. All right, so this isn't just some high-level theory. There's a real, concrete, actionable blueprint you can follow to actually build this. And it's called the Legacy Protocol. It's a simple 3-step blueprint. Step 1 is the post-human audit. You have to stress test your entire system. Ask the hard question: if I vanished off the face of the earth tomorrow, what happens? If the answer is chaos, well, congratulations, you've just found the bug you need to fix. Step 2 is governance over inheritance. This means you stop leaving money directly to people. Instead, you leave it to the systems you've built, systems that are designed to reward merit and responsible behavior. And finally, Step 3, jurisdictional shielding. This is the tactical part, strategically placing your assets in the right legal structures and the right locations to protect them from being easily torn apart by outside forces.
And, when you actually implement this protocol, everything changes. You stop playing the finite game, the game that ends when you do. You start playing the infinite game. You become the architect of a system designed to learn, to adapt, and to grow, not just for your kids, but for centuries to come.
So let's bring it all home with this final thought. You possess a high bandwidth mind. You have the drive, the intelligence, the resources. You have everything you need to build something that actually lasts. So the only real question left is, are you going to keep building magnificent sandcastles on the shore knowing the tide is coming in? Or are you finally going to start architecting your cathedral of stone? Today, we're going to dive into something pretty radical. It's a total shift in how we think about wealth. Forget seeing it as a temporary pile of cash to be spent. Instead, think of it as a permanent, self-sustaining system, one that you can actually architect. This is all about building a legacy that's literally designed to last forever. So let's kick things off with a pretty intense question. If you were gone tomorrow, what happens to everything you've built? Does it keep growing, keep executing on your vision, or does it just, poof, disappear? This is the central challenge we're digging into. The source material lays out two very different paths. On one side, you have what's called a temporary surplus. This is wealth that gets liquidated, eaten up by taxes, and is probably forgotten in just a few years. But on the other side, you have an empire, a system designed to grow all on its own, long after you're out of the picture. The crazy part is, most people think they're building an empire, but in reality, they're just piling up a temporary surplus. Okay, so why? Why do most of these incredible legacies just fall apart? The source argues it's all because of a fundamental flaw in our mental operating system. It calls it the mortality bug. And the diagnosis for this is, well, it's pretty fascinating. The mortality bug isn't some kind of personal failing. It's literally baked into our biology. We are hardwired to think inside our own, maybe 80-year lifespan. And when it comes to building a true legacy, that is a catastrophic failure of systems thinking. You're trying to play an infinite game with a finite mindset.
Here's a great way to think about it. You might have this grand, world-changing vision, But if all your planning is tied to your own life, you're essentially trying to power it with a disposable battery. The power source just doesn't match the scale of the mission. It's doomed to run out.
And this bug? It creates three very predictable problems. First, there's systemic erosion, basically entropy. Without a self-repairing logic, the system just naturally decays over time. Then you've got the consumption trap, where the next generation, who maybe doesn't have that same fire, just burns through the wealth. And finally, there's existential friction, that nagging feeling that everything you're working so hard for is just temporary. This all leads to a really powerful and maybe uncomfortable reframe. The whole idea of just providing for your family gets turned on its head. Without a system in place, just handing over a pile of cash doesn't help. It might actually subsidize complacency, stripping away the very drive that built the wealth in the first place.
Okay, so that's the problem. And yeah, it's a pretty bleak picture, right? But here's the good news. The source doesn't just point out the bug, it actually gives us the patch. And that brings us to the solution, architecting the legacy engine.
So the very first step, the core of this whole thing, is a huge mental shift. You have to stop thinking of yourself as an owner of assets. Instead, you have to become a steward of a system. See the difference? This decouples the wealth from you as an individual and locks it into a durable, independent structure. And let's be clear, the ambition here is massive. This isn't just about being rich. That's a temporary state, right? It's about becoming eternal. We're talking about a permanent state that's measured by how long your system persists. To get there, the source actually gives us a formula for what it calls legacy persistence, or L. Let's break this down real quick. Up top, in the numerator, you have your growth engines, asset yield, that's what your system generates, times your governance logic, which is just the intelligence of your rules. And then down below, in the denominator, you've got the forces of decay, all the tax leakage and what's called generational decay. And this is the magic number, the tipping point. When L is greater than 1, it means your system is growing faster than it's decaying. It becomes self-sustaining, perpetual. This is the exact mathematical moment where rich flips over into eternal. Okay, so you have this powerful formula, you have these rules, but where do you actually put all this stuff? How do you build a container for this engine? Well, that leads us to the concept of the logic cage.
This right here, this is the end game. It's called autonomous perpetuity. It's the state where your system operates according to your code, your principles, your vision, your logic, and it doesn't matter who's alive. It runs itself, forever.
So this logic cage isn't some abstract idea. It's the actual container for your code. And we're talking about real-world structures here. Things like traditional legal frameworks, trusts and foundations, and even new school tech like decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. These are the vessels you use to hold and protect your legacy engine. All right, time to get practical. Let's put all these pieces together into an actual actionable plan. The final part of this puzzle is the step-by-step process for building this thing. This is the legacy protocol. So the protocol has 3 critical steps. Step 1, execute the post-human audit. You literally have to ask yourself, if I vanished right now, what happens? If the whole thing collapses, your system is broken. Step 2, apply the governance over inheritance rule. Basically, stop leaving money to people and start leaving it to protocols that reward the behaviors you want to see. And finally, step 3, perform jurisdictional shielding. You have to think globally and use legal structures to protect your system from being torn apart by taxes or politics. And all of this really boils down to one powerful core idea captured perfectly right here. The goal isn't for you to live forever. It's about building a system that does. It's about achieving a different kind of permanence, one built on logic and elegant design. So that brings us right back to the beginning, back to that first question. But now it's for you to think about. After everything you've worked for, are you just building sandcastles that the tides of time and taxes will just wash away? Or are you architecting a system with the logic to stand forever? The choice and the architecture is yours. Let's forget about just getting rich for a second, or even just passing on some money. What we're really talking about here is architecting a system that is literally built to last forever. This is a huge step beyond conventional thinking. We're talking about engineering true perpetuity. So let me ask you a very real question, and I want you to be honest. If you were taken out of the picture tonight, what happens to everything you've built?
Does it have a life of its own, a protocol to keep growing? Or does it just get liquidated, taxed into oblivion, and completely vanish within a generation or two? Because if it's the latter, you don't have an empire. You just have a temporary surplus of cash. The root of this problem isn't a lack of ambition or a lack of effort on your part. Not at all. It's a bug. It's a bug deep inside your mental operating system, a really critical flaw that we need to find and we need to patch. We call it the mortality bug. And what it is this hardwired biological bias that forces us to plan everything within our own lifespan, that roughly 80-year window. For a high performer, for someone who thinks in systems like you do, this isn't just a minor limitation, it's a catastrophic failure of systems thinking. Think about it like this. You have spent all this time building an incredible high-performance engine. I mean, this thing is a masterpiece, capable of winning any race. But you've only put enough fuel in the tank for one single lap. The moment you, the driver, step out, that beautiful engine just sputters and dies right there on the track. That's the sad reality for most of the world's wealth. Okay, so what are the real-world consequences of operating with this bug? What actually happens to your empire when it's built on such a fundamentally flawed foundation? Well, what happens is systemic erosion. See, any system that doesn't have a self-repairing logic built into it is doomed to entropy. It's just a law of nature. You end up in the consumption trap, where your wealth is just eaten up by the next generation or by taxes, and this creates what we call existential friction, that nagging feeling in the back of your mind that all this hard work, it's all temporary. It's a slow-motion decay that's just disguised as success. And this really gets to the core disconnect. You're trying to run a global-scale vision on a disposable battery. It's literally designed to run out. That is a fatal error in the architecture. Look, without a proper legacy architecture, what you're building isn't really an empire. It's a high-end hobby. It's like building a magnificent cathedral out of cardboard. I mean, it might look impressive for a little while, but it's destined to dissolve in the very first rainstorm. All right, this next idea, this might be the most challenging one we're going to talk about today. The conventional wisdom, providing for your family, is often just a mask for subsidizing their future incompetence. Without a protocol for growth and accountability, you're not giving them a foundation to build on. You're just giving them a soft cushion that actually smothers their own potential. So, we've identified the bug. Now, it's time to install the patch. And this is going to require a fundamental paradigm shift. This is the moment where you stop thinking about accumulating and you start thinking like an architect. You see the difference here. The bugged mindset, the conventional one, it's all about accumulating assets. It's trapped in that 80-year window. The goal is just to be rich. But the protocol-driven mind, it shifts everything. You move from accumulating to architecting, from ownership to systemic stewardship. You stop playing a finite game and you start playing the infinite game. And the goal isn't just to be rich anymore. It's to build something eternal. And this isn't just some nice-sounding philosophy. This is based on pure logic. Your legacy persistence, which we call L, is a function of your system's growth engine, its asset yield, and its operating code, or its governance logic, all divided by the forces of entropy. That means external forces, like tax leakage, and internal forces, like generational decay. Now, when you engineer your system so that L is greater than 1, that's the magic number. That is the tipping point. Your system becomes self-sustaining. It generates more value than entropy can possibly erode. This is the exact moment you transition from being merely rich to creating something truly eternal. Your system outlives you. Okay, so that's the theory. But how do we actually build this? Let's move from the abstract to the blueprint. We need an actionable protocol to go in and dismantle that mortality bug once and for all. The legacy protocol itself stands on 3 core pillars. It's beautifully simple but incredibly powerful. First, you execute the post-human audit. Second, you apply the rule of governance over inheritance. And third, you perform jurisdictional shielding. Let's break down exactly what each of those means. So pillar number 1 is the audit. You have to ask this tough question of yourself, of your team, of your CEO. If I were removed from the system right now, today, what is the precise survival protocol for my assets? And if the answer is anything that sounds like chaos or, well, we'd figure it out, then you've just found a critical system bug, and it needs to be fixed immediately. Pillar 2 completely reframes the idea of inheritance. Here's the rule. You don't leave money to people. You leave it to protocols. You architect a system. It could be a trust, a foundation, even a DAO, an organization literally run by code, that operates on your logic. Access to capital is no longer a birthright. It becomes a reward for competent, high-resolution behavior that actually advances the system's goals. And finally, pillar 3. This is all about defense. You have to shield your system from all that external entropy. This means using global strategies to place your assets in what we call perpetual jurisdictions. These are legal environments where the state cannot just come in and dismantle your legacy through probate or crush it with massive inheritance taxes. By executing these 3 steps, you're not just managing wealth anymore. No way, you are building an autonomous, infinite engine that is truly designed for perpetuity. And this is the end state. This is what we're working towards. When the protocol is fully in place, you can finally say with complete confidence, the foundation is solid, the empire is infinite. Your work will continue to compound and grow long after you're gone, guided by the very logic you set in motion. So, I'll leave you with this one final thought. Take a hard, honest look at what you're building today. Is it a magnificent sandcastle? Beautiful, sure, but totally temporary, just waiting for the tide to come in and wash it all away? Or are you architecting an infinite empire built on a foundation of solid, unbreakable protocol? The choice, as always, is yours.